Pressing go live made it like mute itself or something. It's like quiet now.
Well, hold on a second. Can you hear that?
Yeah, sit down for a second. Yeah, it's got to go. I'm sorry.
It's all right. All right.
It's unbelievable how good your mic is. It is picking up everything.
Yeah, that's not good because it's hot as fuck. I got no sleep last night. It's going to be 90 degrees in here, and I'm not going to get any sleep tonight either until that fucking cools off, which takes about 2 hours.
Ooh, she cranky.
I'm not happy.
All right.
I've been listening to the wrong part of the fucking podcast or the book for like what? How long have we been off? A month?
Yeah.
Like from what you showed me today is a 9-minute portion of the book. So instead of focusing on that, I've been listening to the whole chapter, to the whole chapter, to the whole chapter, instead of gaining a superior knowledge of what we're going to be focusing on for this next episode. So the last minute, I'm trying to put shit in that I learned, and it is what it is.
I think we'll be good.
All right. Let me grab one more can, and then I know you got to cut all this out, but give me 2 more seconds.
All right.
Do you have weights at your house?
Yep.
Do you lift there or do you go to the gym?
I lift here.
Do you have the wielding or the wielders set, like the Olympic set?
Yep.
All right. I'm going to start coming over.
All right. I don't mess around with that standard stuff. I'm a Oli lifter.
All right. When do you lift? You lift early in the morning, right?
Yeah.
Fuck. I got to do something to burn this energy off. It's not good for the mental health, my attitude, and my tits.
And the movies.
All right, let's get this fucking shit over with.
Welcome back to Revolutionary Roulette. I'm Rob Zielinski. You can find me on Twitter at Rob Zielinski. That's ZIELINSKI. Follow the show on Instagram at Revolutionary Roulette, or email the show at revolutionaryroulette@gmail.com. And I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, Mr. Joshua Catlow.
Hey, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. You can find me on Facebook at Joshua Patrick for a few more weeks before I think I kick that shit bag to the curb. I can't take the political landscapes of it anymore. You can find me on Twitter at Joshua Catlow, CATLOW, and you can find me on Instagram at Joshua Patrick, or also on Twitter mourning the trade of a certain number 2 for the Chicago Blackhawks, Duncan Keith, who was traded to the Edmonton Oilers today. And I'm happy for him so he could be closer to his son, which he barely got to see in 2020 because of COVID-19. And I know this isn't a sports program, but we are going to be talking about Indian Chiefs, and the number 1 Indian Chief in Chicago is Duncan Keith. So it kind of relates. So bear with me. Give me a break. It's a sad day.
Nicely done, sir. If you want to support the show, you could do that at patreon.com/revolutionary roulette, or check out a relatively new platform, and you can support us, revolutionaryroulette.com. I'm sorry. I'm looking at it and I still fucked it up. I knew I was gonna.
It happens.
revolutionaryroulette.supercast.tech. It is not an app. There is no app, but the website is mobile friendly. Quickly, I wanted to mention the Newberg conspiracy, which was what we discussed last week in regards to George Washington.
Last year.
Yeah. George Washington making his own soldiers kill their friends because they wanted to get paid. So again, that's a known conspiracy called the Newberg conspiracy. If you want to delve into that a little bit deeper, go ahead and check that out. So weeks ago, I teased that we'll learn what Chief Hendrick of the Mohawks said to New York Governor George Clinton in 1753 when the Mohawks were swindled out of 800,000 acres of land. So I'm just going to quote the recording here. Brother, when we came here to relate our grievances about the lands, we expected to have something done for us. And we have told you that the covenant chain of our forefathers was like to be broken. And brother, you tell us that we shall be redressed at Albany. But we know them so well. We will not trust to them, for they, the Albany merchants, are no people but devils. So as soon as we come home, we will send up a belt of wampum to our brothers and other 5 nations to acquaint them the covenant chain is broken between you and us. So, brother, you are not to expect to hear of me anymore, and brother, we desire to hear no more of you.
Before you go too far into delving into that, I dug up some information about Chief Hendrick. He was a member of the Bear Clan. He resided in the Kanahani or Upper Mohawk Castle in colonial New York. By Mohawk matrilineal kinship systems, he was considered born to the Bear Clan. It's pretty interesting that hereditary offices and properties are passed through the maternal lines, and that the mother's oldest brother plays a more prominent role than Hendrick's father actually does, which allows the children, especially for boys, the fact that his uncle is more important than the father. This system allowed the Mohawk to adopt and assimilate war captives into their tribe, absorbing them as Mohawk friendly themselves. So, or maybe not Mohawk friendly is probably not proper terminology, but they became part of the Mohawk tribe because of the sister's brother instead of the actual maternal father, which I found to be some interesting information.
Yeah, no, that's fascinating. Dynamite drop in, Monty.
Appreciate it.
So when the 7 Years' War ended in 1763, the French ceded the lands west of the Appalachian Mountains to the British, ignoring their old allies in the Native Americans. So the Indians had to band together to fight and make war on the western forts of the British. This became known as Pontiac's conspiracy. British General Geoffrey Amherst was negotiating with the Indian chiefs, attacking Fort Pitt, and as a part of his quote-unquote negotiating, Amherst gave the Indians blankets from the smallpox hospital. So smallpox epidemic broke out amongst the Indians in what could have possibly been the first instance of biological warfare. Just absolutely ruthless and disgustingly immoral. That's like today being like, hey, we're in a ceasefire and in negotiations for a peace treaty, but also we just dropped sarin gas on one of your major cities. Like, get the fuck out of here.
It's obviously what you just stated is horrible, and a large quantity of Mohawk and Iroquois were hit with the outbreak of smallpox, but as we'll find out a little bit later, it did not dampen the spirit of the Mohawk or the Iroquois tribe.
That's exactly right. So like you said, the will of the Indians could not be demolished as they continued fighting using guerrilla warfare until finally a peace was made known as the Royal Proclamation of 1763. Part of the agreement was that a border or some sort of established line along the Appalachians in which colonial settlements could not intrude. So this, of course, ticked off the Americans, and we can also glean why the Indians fought with the British during the Revolutionary War. So with their French allies gone and now their British allies gone, the Indians now had to resist a land-hungry nation by themselves.
Exactly. The British, the British fought the French, and the French were traitors, but at least they didn't want to occupy the Indian land. So the fact that they were traitors was less. The land was way more valuable, or what they thought was going to be way more valuable, considering they had to fight every inch of the way for it. And if they were to ever have been considered for voting rights, we all know that property was one of the contributing factors as to being allowed to vote. We know now in recollection that there was never a chance in hell that men, women, blacks, Indians, etc., anybody outside of white men, no indentured servants, no slaves, etc., were never going to be given that right to vote, no matter how much land they owned during that specific period of time. However, it made sense why the Indians fought with the French instead of the British.
So American historian Fritz Jennings described the fighting over Indian lands as a, quote, multiplicity of variously oppressed and exploited peoples who preyed upon each other. And people everywhere are still doing this shit. This is class war, a North and South war, not this sort of East-West battle. The result of the Revolutionary War was a little more complicated for black slaves, most of which were from the North, as thousands fought for the British and about 5,000 fought for the Americans on the American side. One of the cool things was that during the chaos of the Revolutionary War, black slaves were able to evade their shithead masters. Some continued to evade them and stay in America as free blacks, or they hopped on a ship when the Brits went home to settle in England or continue to travel on to the West Indies or Nova Scotia, or even found their way back to Africa, that's just good stuff.
All I can picture is Eddie Murphy playing a slave role and just saying, fuck this shit, I'm going to Harlem. That's all I can envision because of the movie Life. I just see Eddie Murphy and Martin Lawrence hopping a ship or hitting the Underground Railroad, which was way 100 years later on. But you know what I'm getting at.
Yes.
I'm just, that's all I can envision when they actually had the opportunity to become free after all the bullshit they've endured as slaves. I just see them peacefully riding into the sunset, like, get me the fuck out of here.
Yeah, no, that's a beautiful image.
Upstate New York, here I come.
And for those of you who are interested in like the Underground Railroad and Harriet Tubman, there's an excellent episode of the podcast The Dollop where they cover Harriet Tubman, and she's even more incredible than you can ever imagine. So highly recommend the Dollop episode of Harriet Tubman. So it took 5 chapters, but I found a whole ass paragraph in which I disagree with Zinn, and it's in regards to Thomas Jefferson.
Good for you, buddy.
So Zinn writes, quote, Jefferson tried his best as an enlightened, thoughtful individual might, but the structure of American society, the power of the cotton plantation, the slave trade, the politics of unity between northern and southern elites, and the long culture of race prejudice in the colonies, as well as his own weaknesses. That combination of practical need and ideological fixation kept Jefferson a slave owner throughout his life. Zinn is just flat out wrong here. In no way did Jefferson try his best, okay? Jefferson didn't need to be a slave owner his entire life. And the fact that he died on July 4th isn't some romantic, serendipitous event. It's the fact that he died while in massive debt, which is a big part of what makes Zinn wrong here. Jefferson's mansion, his beloved Monticello, was both expansive and fucking expansive, if you know what I'm saying.
I like it.
So,
yeah, son.
His house took 40 years to be built. He had his own personal French chef. He spent, in today's money, anywhere between $1 to $2 million a year on wine. He bought all kinds of artwork and paintings to decorate his mansion. He bought tons of musical instruments and books. So no, Jefferson did not try his best. It was Jefferson's lifestyle and his proverbial penchant for finer things in life that kept him a slave owner all his life. I mean, Pee Wee Gaskins, that's the final truth.
I mean, to be honest with you, you don't even really need to look at Thomas Jefferson to tell how Thomas Jefferson lived. You could look at the people around him like Nathaniel Greene and Andrew Jackson and just see that the lifestyle in which he led, he had so many opportunities to do right by the slaves, but never once took that opportunity because somebody had to open and uncork and decant his wine every evening.
Yeah.
He had his own personal sommeliers in numerous black slaves that were, and indentured servants that served on the, for lack of a better term, plantation. I forget exactly what he named it, and you just called it. I apologize. Monticello.
Monticello.
I think that's one of the biggest arguments that we get into when it comes to slavery, slave culture, slave ownership, that's just how it was back then. And everybody points out the fact that your moral compass would have probably been different if everything you had been taught back then would have been that slavery is right and just and helps you get ahead. Well, coming from someone who's been poor the vast majority of their life, minus a 6-year stint with my parents in high school, I can tell you that my moral compass has always come first. And I've made many, many, many mistakes in my life, but it's never been on account of money. It's never been to screw people over. It's always been dealing with other issues. And the people that use the "that's just how it was" excuse back then, I think that you need to be more open to your inner self, your inner dialogue, and maybe even to more literature that can help explain reasonings as to why that excuse is not the greatest. And I would even go as far as saying bullshit.
I would have, now he's a philosophizer. So I would have to think about that a little bit harder. And it's
Well,
definitely.
I know you're going to disagree, so
No, I don't know if I necessarily disagree. That's why I need to ponder on that for until next week, because it's definitely easier to say, like, if you're a leftist, to say something like along the lines of, oh, if this was 1917 Russia, I would have been a Bolshevik. Well, that's bullshit, because you would not have existed. You wouldn't have had the same experiences that you've had in this life. So to say that you would have been a Bolshevik just because those are your politics now, who knows? I mean, you may have, if you were in 1917 Russia, you may have been a Romanov. You may have been one of the part of the monarchy. So you don't really know. You would not have been a Bolshevik if you were a Romanov. So
with all due respect to Russia, I mean, we're talking about the fact that in the United States, or what became of, I guess what I'm trying to say, Rob, is at what point do you think they realized that this government was not helping them at all? And what I mean them, I'm talking about damn near everybody except for we say 1% all the time. So let's say it again here. So if you can't count on your own government to help even the upper class, except for the few people that owned all the wealth, land, etc., when do you think they figured out that this is all bullshit and a rebellion should happen, but never did? I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'm speaking out of pocket here. It's just
no. So you mean, like, at one point, do you think they thought, like, hey, we may need a revolution to
that the only way that their life was going to change for the better was to rebel? And as we find out through chapter 5, chapter 6, and beyond, that white men feared the coming together of Indians, slaves, indentured servants, numerous time and time again. But for some ungodly fucking reason, they never assembled. They couldn't form like Voltron, come in and take control. And I just wonder, because you can't say, well, that was because of their thinking, because that at some point they figured out that, hey man, this is the only way. Are we going to sit here and take what's going on to us, or are we going to rebel? And for some reason, they never rebelled. I mean, in smaller forms, they rebelled. Of course, we've spoken of that, but never to the point of which it was a mass rebellion to get their land back. I mean, in few instances, it was just a bunch of drunken gun owners that would rebel against the English trying to get paid a proper wage, or instances like that.
Right. So just to try to quickly answer your question. So I think they saw what happened in like 1848 Germany when they had their revolution. And then so Russia was like, damn, that kind of looks like that works. And they had a sort of spontaneous revolution in 1905 that was obviously failed. And then they, Lenin did, and Trotsky and all of those guys, get all this stuff from the Walter Rodney books. He lays out that, they did some more organizing and, pulling together all these different people, and they were able to actually pull off a revolution all together through the organizing. So that the spontaneous revolutions can happen, but it's a lot harder to fight as like one front, right? So they figured let's organize again and strike when we can. And during World War One, they struck while the iron was hot. So I just kind of glazed over like what 75 years there, but
your knowledge of the situation is going to be a lot more in depth than mine. The only thing, I guess, my anger. For the first time in this book, I am angry at the oppressed. I am angry at the impoverished, because I know it would have been difficult to take matters into their own hands, but at what point do you say, fuck this and die trying? I'm not trying to sound like 50 Cent, which I just did, but at some point, that's what my ass is saying, because you're not hitting me with whips and shit for year after year after year after year. I'm either going out swinging or it's going to be the end. And I think this is the first time, and I'm not mad at them. I'm mad at the situation, I guess, is a better way to put it.
For sure. Yeah. And that's why, I'm going to jump back into the book here, but quickly, This is why, like, I'm in favor of a general strike. So let's not do we're not going to pull off a full on revolution. Nobody's going to beat the American military. Right. So it's going to be, fucking with the money and not going to work. And so that's the point of like a general strike, is you just don't go to work. You shut down the economy. That way you're not going to actually drone strike fight the American military. You're going to lose every time.
Quickly, now's the time to do it, because nobody wants to go to work. Everywhere you see is a job wanted poster, because they're getting paid more to sit on their ass at home, which sounds like a horrible statement to say, but it's true, because you're getting that $600 bonus for a few more months. Why actually go work when you're making more money to sit out the couch, which is frustrating for me, who's been a day one essential worker, but just thinking about the people that work in the hospitals.
Right.
But that's neither here nor there, and not a part of the 1753 situation. In which
no, but it goes into part of why we're doing
it. Parallels.
If people call for a general strike, obviously we're going to be a part of that. So
two's better than none, I guess.
Charles Beard, by Cracky, an American historian who wrote the book An American Interpretation of the Constitution, breaks down how the rich must control the laws of government or directly control the government to preserve their own self-interests. This ties in nicely with what we've mentioned before. By that definition, we do not live in a democracy, but in oligarchy. Remember, every single senator is a millionaire, every one of them. So again, Google the Princeton/Northwestern study on that we discussed within the first few episodes. So 55 men went to Philly in 1787 to write the Constitution. Beard discovered that the majority of them were lawyers, which in this case, where you're drafting a bunch of laws, it does make sense to have a few attorneys in the room. And just another quick side note, I know we keep jumping back in history here, but I believe all of the Nazis who attended the Wannsee Conference, which was like the meeting to discuss the final solution of the Jewish question, aka the evacuation, aka the Holocaust, aka the termination of Germany's Jewish people. So there's a good 2001 movie called Conspiracy that goes through the script of this conference. I just thought there was an interesting parallel there, and in no way am I equating the two. But anyway, the majority of the men at the Constitutional Convention were lawyers, but all of them, no matter their profession, whether it was slave owner, they were in shipping, manufacturing, etc., they were all wealthy. More receipts here. According to the Treasury Department records, 40 of the 55 of them held government bonds. This would mean that they would want to establish a strong federal government to protect their wealth. And obviously, as always, Black slaves, white indentured servants, Native Americans, women, and men without property had zero representation at the Constitutional Convention.
Just like today.
Just like today. So just, again, they're all millionaires, and none of the poor have a true say. We live in an oligarchy. So all of these unrepresented folks began to organize in opposition to the legislature and assembled illegal conventions of their own. One man at one of these illegal conventions named Plow Yager, which is just like a dynamite name.
That's a great porn name.
I didn't even think about that. I was thinking more like some sort of Bash brother in hockey or something like that.
Can you imagine showing up with a pizza?
Chaim Plow Yager. So Plow Yager stood up and said, quote, "I have been greatly abused, have been obliged to do more than my part in the war, been loaded with class rates, town rates, province rates, constitutional rates, and all rates, been pulled and hauled by sheriffs, constables, and collectors, and had my cattle sold for less than what they were worth. The great men are going to get all we have, and I think it is time for us to rise up and put a stop to it and have no more courts, nor sheriffs, nor collectors, nor lawyers."
This man was onto something, and I think he was the original Eagle Man. Look at those low rates. But
I'm staying.
This guy was onto something, because to do away with the court system that just fucks you over anyway. Beautiful. What is that, velvet?
Right. And as we alluded to before, there's definitely two justice systems in America, one for white folks, one for BIPOC Americans.
True story.
So we mentioned the Newburgh conspiracy before, and also the Oregon protesters protecting the family in the Red House with what is now known as the Red House eviction defense. And so what sprouted from these opposition convictions in the late 1780s were these veterans of the Continental Army who were ticked because they were basically given IOUs, these certificates to redeem at a later date instead of that straight cash, homie.
Mm-hmm.
And when they couldn't pay off their debts, they were thrown into debtors' prisons. So leaders like Luke Day stepped in, and they organized themselves and the yeoman farmers into squads and companies and protested and prevented judges from holding court. Yes, the local sheriff called up the local militia to defend the court against the armed yeoman farmers, but most of the militia agreed with Luke Day and his army. So the sheriff was able to wrangle about 500 men together, but they would have been facing Day's 1,500 men who were armed with weapons and maybe even more powerful desperation and a sense of urgency.
It's I had some notes on that somewhere. Unfortunately, I can't find it, but off the top of my noggin here, it was one of them things where they called the militia in to help protect them from having to leave the halls of the courthouse, or was it called Congress at that time? The Continental Congress.
Yes.
Yeah. And they kind of got slapped in the face when they were like, "Are you guys fucking shitting me here? You're trying to do this to the people, and you expect us to have your back in this matter? I mean, you haven't paid these people for war. You paid them such a small, or promised them such a small rate, and never delivered on it. And yet you're still asking for the militia, or AKA white men with heavy artillery or considered to be heavy artillery for back in that time, to help them get off the steps of the Continental Congress." And it was just like, Fuck no, that ain't happening. We're not doing it.
Yeah.
We're actually going to stand up for our fellow brethren, and you're going to have to get the fuck out.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. You said something in there that I hadn't considered. So yeah, very, very well said. So again, there were these, plenty of these kind of mini revolutions. So this is the part of the episode where I tell you to make sure you go and read the book on your own if you want to check out all of the examples that Zinn gives. We can't sit here and go through every single one of them. But we also might discuss we must discuss a specific rebellion in 1780. Enter Daniel Shays. Real quick, just wanted to say again, you can support the show, revolutionaryroulette.supercast.tech or patreon.com/revolutionaryroulette. So Daniel Shays was a poor farmhand when he joined and fought for the Continental Army in well-known battles like Bunker Hill, Saratoga, Lexington. But again, he got wounded in action and he wasn't getting paid. So he was like, forget all this, and resigned. But that didn't work out very well for him either. He was back home and seeing what was going on firsthand and happening to his people in his community as he found himself in court for debts he couldn't pay because the government didn't pay him.
Quickly interrupting, at that time, even through injury or through the continuance of the whole Revolutionary War, you were promised half your wage for life, which granted was only $3.33 for a captain and $75 for a general. And I believe he fell somewhere in between that. But regardless, this man is going to court for not being able to pay his bills, and you motherfuckers aren't even coming off your wallets. It's like,
you're the ones that are supposed to be paying him.
That's exactly it. So what the fuck am I doing here?
So just something else that Shays saw with his own eyes was this woman who was sick, couldn't pay her debts either, had her bed taken right from underneath her as part of payment. Good God. So in September that year, the Supreme Judicial Court of Massachusetts indicted 11 rebellion leaders, 3 of which were Shays' personal friends and another being Luke Day himself. The Supreme Judicial Court of Massachusetts was due to hold court a week later, so Shays got ready. He organized 700 armed farmers, most of which were Revolutionary War vets, and headed them to Springfield, Massachusetts. However,
and they went back again.
Yeah. 900 militiamen led by a general and a damn cannon were waiting for them. Shays asked the general, once they got there, just to parade through the town square, and the general obliged. So Shays' parade started, and the ranks grew as they marched. Some reinforcements from the countryside began to join them, and some of the Springfield militia joined them too. This was enough for the judges to postpone the indictment hearings for the day and adjourn the court.
Mission accomplished for the short term, at least.
Yeah, again, just another
small victory
example of, the soldiers being like, no, we're kind of on their side on this one, not going to protect your damn oligarchy. So just a heads up for you, Josh, if you may not want to drink another Samuel Adams beer for the rest of your life after you hear this doozy of a tale.
Let's go.
Do you enjoy Samuel Adams beer from time to time?
I've had a few Chardonnays. What of it?
So Governor James Baldwin told the general court, which was made up of fellas who recently were rebels against Britain, but now held local office and were calling for law and order, to, quote, vindicate the insulted dignity of the government. First of all, kiss my ass. So Sam Adams helped to write the Riot Act and a resolution that allowed authorities to immorally keep men in jail without a trial. So there you have it. Samuel Adams went from a so-called radical leader in Boston to a damn butt-sniffing federal bootlicker.
All on account of just not having the. How many times are we going to talk about a moral compass?
The moral compass, or
a spine, backbone,
gumption, balls, courage.
Yeah. And it wasn't like he was struggling at this point.
This is exactly why, because he wanted to, rise above his station, keep going, protect his wealth and power.
Most people at this point were wanting to assume land, because land was going to be ways to make your copious amounts of cash, with the big ideas of possibility of railroads and pushing the Mohawk and Algonquin and Iroquois from north of the Ohio, east of the Mississippi, and south of the Great Lakes, and getting them out of the area, and just taking opportunity to regain even more land. But instead, incarceration for those for unjust reasons continue in 2021, and they were just as big a part as anything else in 1765.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, it's always been, from the start with this country, it's been about land. It's been about property. Back then it was the land, and today, anytime there is a riot, usually a just riot, people are up in arms because a Walmart gets looted, because
a Macy's window get broke. Man, fuck that shit.
Fuck your property.
It's so silly. I mean, don't get me. When these things happen, I'm not rooting for people to get injured. However, I'm also not rooting for people to not have change happen. So it's one of them give and takes. And I'm always going to side on the side of the oppressed. I'm always going to side on those of the rioters. That's just where I'm going to be. And most people are like, even the people that are breaking in and looting, I don't condone the looting, but that's not my concern. That a few idiots are out there jumping into stores, stealing Coach purses and shit like that, when other people are actually trying to lead a revolution, trying to lead for change, trying to lead for justice and equality for all. But we lose the grand scheme of things because news outlets and organizations brainwash people into thinking that these particular acts of rioting have no meaning outside of gathering goods to show off, steal, sell, whatever. But in all actuality, what it's really showing is fuck you, fuck your system, and we're not taking this no more.
That's right. Yeah. Maybe, give these people the same amount of resources and chances that you give other communities, and they won't feel the need to steal a Samsung TV that they can keep or sell to have some extra money because they're doing, crimes of desperation. So the Riot Act didn't really have any immediate impact, as 160 insurgents occupied the courthouse in Worcester, and more conflicts like this took place. The rich Boston merchants funded an army and met Shays' men on a field, and an artillery duel ensued. 3 of Shays' rebels were killed. The New England winter began coming on strong, and since they were outgunned and outmanned, some were forced to surrender to this Boston army. More and more rebels were captured, and 33 of them were put on trial, with 6 of them being condemned to death. The general of this Boston merchant-funded army, General Lincoln, actually called for a commission of clemency and urged mercy on the rebels. But Sammy Adams, good old Bootlick McGee over there, rebutted with, quote, In monarchy, the crime of treason may admit of being pardoned or lightly punished, but the man who dares rebel against the laws of a republic ought to suffer death. Whew. So fuck Sam Adams forever. Anyway, that'll be that's the last time I mentioned him today, I think. But so some of the rebels were hanged, some but somehow Shays himself was pardoned in 1788, went back to his home in Massachusetts decades later in 1825, as Zinn puts it, poor and obscure. But today, we salute you and your rebellion, Mr. Daniel Shays.
It's abundantly clear to me what should be on the currency and legal tender of today's money, and it's pull yourself up by your bootstraps, because that seems to be a statement that white America especially falls in love with. And I'm sure we're going to be facing catering to the black audience, as we usually have to throughout the show. But in all actuality, what it's catering to is the fairness and the resilience of people to keep fighting and putting forth that spirit to try and invoke change, instead of just sitting and laying dormant.
Yeah. And just to throw this little piece of information out at you, that term was coined and became popular. And guess what? It is actually physically impossible to pull yourself up by the bootstraps. So kind of dumb.
Yeah, it is kind of dumb.
So I'm not exactly sure what to make of this, but Thomas Jefferson did write about rebellions in a letter to a friend while he was in France, being an ambassador for America. And Shays' rebellion was actually happening simultaneously. And Jefferson wrote, "I hold it that a little rebellion now and then is a good thing. It is a medicine necessary for the sound health of government. God forbid that we should ever be 20 years without such a rebellion. The tree of liberty must be refreshed from time to time with the blood of patriots and tyrants. It is a natural manure."
I think what he's saying there is that the blood of the people that put up the fight are what refreshes the land and the souls of those to keep fighting. I mean, nobody's ever going to fall in line forever. So old Tommy Jeff there is saying that for the good of the country. I don't think he's saying it as a symbolic gesture that he's proud of his nation for standing up. I think he's saying that he's happy that people get put down and used, as he quoted, their own manure. Like the blood of the people that have been spilled is used to regrow a new form of people that are just going to rise up and be in this same situation as the people fighting before them. And that's poor and impoverished.
Right. So he's glad that it happens just so they can be crushed.
That's how I feel about it. I don't think he's not happy that his government is being challenged. He's not happy that he has to arm a militia of 900 men to try and keep from coming after him and other members of his cabinet. You know, it's
but he enjoys that lifeblood, and the blood being spilled on the soil.
Politicians are any adjective you can throw in the book except for one. They're not stupid, for the most part.
They weren't very stupid. Nowadays, they're all dumb as fuck for the most part, but they all have the money because it's an oligarchy to actually be able to run and win office.
Yeah, so it's you could see the way in which that he was trying to swing the imagination or that thereof his constituents in the Continental Congress is how I view it. I by far am not a historian. I'll holler at Zim a little later, see what he thinks. But I don't by any means think it's something that Thomas Jefferson was proud of his people for doing, which saying his people even sounds weird.
Yeah, no, I hear you. So just to put a little bow on this. So General Henry Knox, who was a veteran of George Washington's army, he was discussing Shays' rebellion, and I'm just going to finish up with a quote here. He that attempts opposition to this creed is an enemy to equity and justice and ought to be swept from off the face of the earth. So I don't want to say they were like looking for rebels and hoping that something happened so that they could try to wipe them off the face of the earth and have their cute little Puritan oligarchy in America. But I don't know. What are your thoughts on that one?
My thoughts is BIPOC, Tupac, X-Pac, smallpox. We out this motherfucker.
Okay, so again, support the show, patreon.com/revolutionary roulette or revolutionaryroulette.supercast.tech. And until next time, at the risk of sounding eloquent, let's do a general strike.
General. Thank you for joining us, everybody. We appreciate it. Thanks for listening. We put a lot of work into the podcast, as you can tell. And once again, please consider supporting us on one of the platforms in which Rob mentioned. We'll see you next week with a little bit more of Chapter 5, and we'll try and do it in a timely fashion and not a month later.
That's right. And we will try to actually finish Chapter 5.
He's lying.
Thanks, folks.